Mr. Rijn joined ADB in 2007, and before that, he is a consultant in Nepal for 5 years, in Ghana for 5 years, and in Dutch consultant company in another 3 years. His specialization is on public finance and physical decentralization. So now the floor is yours. You will have around 40 to 45 minutes for your presentation, and then another 20 to 30 minutes for question and answer.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I think I can do it faster than that. Do I need a microphone or can people hear me? I think you can hear me now. From here. Okay.
Sorry, do you mind like move your back? Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the main reason I am in Bangkok now is to discuss a possible partnership between Thammasat University and this faculty in particular and ADB, or the department where I live. So hopefully we had our first discussions this morning, and hopefully next year, June, July, we'll jointly host a conference here in Bangkok. Probably on the broad theme of challenges that are faced by middle-income countries in Asia and the Pacific. But then I suggested that I could also make use of this trip, or this visit, to introduce you to a database that the department where I work, is the Independent Evaluation Department at the ADB, that we operate and which is publicly accessible, which contains more than 6,000 lessons learned from ADB projects, programs, and country partnerships over the last almost 25 years. So that database is publicly accessible to anybody. It's not just for ADB staff. A couple of months ago, I did a similar demonstration in Singapore, the National University of Singapore, the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. And there, I got two reactions. One is that the students thought it was a good resource for them, for their own research. But also it opens up possibilities for possible cooperation between us at the ADB and you guys here in the university in terms of further analytical work. Because the database I will show you later is just a database. It contains really project-specific lessons learned across all countries in the region and across about 10 or 12 different economic sectors. But the trick will be, of course, to use this database and to develop knowledge products that synthesize, for example, lessons learned in the education sector in the last 10 years in Cambodia, right? That sort of ready-made analysis the database doesn't give you, so that requires a lot of work. So let me go through the presentation, then we can discuss it further, whether you think there are opportunities there to perhaps team up at a later stage. Now what I want to do is, before I run the database, let me give you a very brief introduction about the department where I work now. The way that the ADB is organized is that we have what we call the operational departments. That's where all the projects and programs are prepared. And that part of the bank is organized regionally. So we have a South Asia department, Southeast Asia, Central and West Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific department. I used to be in the Pacific department for a couple of years. And about 2.5 years ago, I joined the Independent Evaluation Department. And that is basically, you can compare it with a sort of a performance audit outfit in the bank. So that department where I am now evolved from a unit in the Economic Research Office to a fully fledged independent evaluation department. Now what does that, well, first let's say, why do we evaluate? For the bank, there's two reasons that we evaluate. One is accountability to our clients, and clients are to a large extent governments in the Asia-Pacific region, although we also have a private sector arm that has been growing and that will continue to grow in the years to come. I've never worked in the private sector arm, I've always worked in the public sector arm. So our accountability is obviously to the people who borrow money from the ADB. But second, evaluation is also useful, we hope at least, because it would contribute to learning in the ADB. The big difference from a governance perspective is that the department where I work now is the only department in the bank that does not report, is not accountable to ADB's president, but accountable to the board of directors. So we report directly to the stakeholders of the bank and not to ADB management. Again, from an accountability perspective, that's different, right? So you can see the board of directors is the equivalent of a parliament rather than the executive branch of the government. So what do we evaluate? Basically everything. We evaluate project programs, country partnership strategies, but also ADB business procedures and business processes, you name it. The way that we compile our work plan is partly driven by ourselves and partly driven by requests from the board of directors, whom we are accountable to. In the end, of course, what you want is that the evaluation of programs leads to better results, or contributes at least to better results in the way that ADB formulates and implements its projects. Now, what you see in this slide is that evaluation takes place at two levels in the bank. One is self-evaluation by the people in the operational department. So what that means is that within a year after a project that you are responsible for closes, you need to make a self-assessment of how you think the project performed. And of course that all goes against a standard template and a standard format using standard criteria. But it essentially is self-evaluation. How do you assess the success or not of the project that you have been responsible for? Then there's a second layer, and that's what we call independent evaluation. And that's the department. So all self-evaluation reports, or project completion reports, we call them in the ADB, are validated by the department where I work. And what you typically see is that there is a little bit of a difference between how people evaluate themselves and how we validate that assessment, which is not strange, right? That's natural. You tend to be a bit more optimistic when you assess yourself than when you get assessed by somebody else. So the disconnect between self-evaluation, independent evaluation in the ADB is completely at par with what you see in all the other MDBs, like the World Bank, the IMF, or the Inter-American Development Bank. In terms of the project cycle in ADB operations, where does evaluation fit in? It all starts with country partnerships. These are typically 3-year rolling frameworks that we have with our client governments. That country partnership is filled up with projects, investments projects, but also technical assistance projects and knowledge focused products. That gets appraised, it gets implemented, and then it gets evaluated, and hopefully the lessons learned from that evaluation feed into the next cycle of country program and project development again. So that's, again, what all these slides are not very specific for ADB. This is the basic business processes that you see in all the development banks. I touched upon this earlier already. What do we evaluate? We do corporate evaluations, which are related to corporately, strategically important issues for the ADB. We do thematic and sectoral evaluations. What has ADB done in terms of its support to gender over the last 5 years, or how have we supported inclusive growth over the last 5 years? Then we evaluate the country partnerships. So that happens every 3 to 4 years. And we do impact evaluations. That is mostly done actually by our colleagues in the economics and research department. Simply for these impact evaluations are very resource intensive, very expensive, and they just happen to have more budget to do this type of evaluations. And then every year we prepare an annual report where we basically summarize the findings of that year. These are the evaluation criteria that we use, and again, these are standardized across all the banks. So this is not ADB specific, this is all harmonized across the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the ADB, the IMF, and the Islamic Development, no, not the Islamic Development Bank, but they're working on this. So we look at relevance, are we doing the right things? We look at effectiveness, are we doing things right? Efficiency, of course, effectiveness divided by money. Are we cost effective in the way that we operate? How sustainable is it, what we do, and particularly in infrastructure operations, that's a big problem. In the sense that infrastructure investments are quite often quite successful, but the maintenance of those assets is problematic for both institutional reasons and financial reasons. And of course, in the end, you want to know what the impact is of what you do. These are the different types of products that IED delivers. We won't go into the details of that. Some of the strategic considerations that inform our work plan are, I'll just highlight a couple. The first one is very important, doing the right studies at the right time. At the moment we have a corporate strategic framework that looks at big issues like inclusive growth, environmentally sustainable growth, regional cooperation and integration. So once that corporate framework gets implemented, it makes sense, of course, that you also evaluate the big themes in that corporate strategy. So we align the way that we program our studies with ADB's operational priorities. Otherwise, if we don't work in agriculture at all, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start evaluating agricultural products, right? Finding a balance between accountability and learning, we touched upon that already. There's also this issue of finding a balance between staying engaged with the operational departments and being completely independent. And different organizations use different models. If you look at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, their independent evaluation office is completely disconnected from anything that the fund does operationally. So from an independence point of view, they're on the maximum side of the spectrum. In terms of their engagement with the people in the operational department, that hardly takes place. So the influence that they have, the day-to-day contact that they have with their colleagues in operations, is almost close to zero. In the ADB, we're a little bit in the middle. Yes, we are independent. From a governance point of view, we certainly are, but there is still a lot of engagement with the people in operations, and there's even also rotation of staff. Like I came from the operational side, I'm now working with IED, and probably I want to go back to the project side at some point. So that is, in the ADB, that's possible. You have to be wary, of course, of conflicts of interest. Like, for example, when I joined IED almost 3 years ago, there was a big governance evaluation which was being scheduled. Now, because I just came from the operational side, working on a lot of governance-related initiatives, obviously I cannot be part of the team that does that evaluation, because I could very well be evaluating my own work, which constitutes quite a blatant conflict of interest, of course. So you have to be careful with that. How do you make your evaluations, or how do you try to make your evaluations influential, at least? What drives that, of course, is that the work that you do is only useful if people actually use it. Now, most people in the bank do not have the time to read 70 pages or 80 pages evaluation reports. So normally what we do is, after we come out with a big study, we summarize it in a very user-friendly 3 to 4 page format. We are very active with the findings of that evaluation online through social media. We use audio-visual means to sort of market, if you like, the messages from these studies. And we're quite active in terms of our appearance in seminars, conferences, brown bag events, you name it. So it doesn't end with just writing a report. A couple of examples how evaluation can make a difference. We did one a couple of years ago on natural disaster risks. Natural disaster and disaster risks, and ADB's support to that, which at that time was a pretty low level. As a result of this evaluation, a specific disaster response facility, which is basically a fund that can be tapped into very quickly in case of a natural disaster. It was used, for example, in Nepal in 2015 when Nepal was hit by that terrible earthquake. So that's a funding facility that can be operationalized quickly in the case of natural disasters. This is a bit more corporate, it's not very interesting for you. This was during the time of the midterm strategy, the midterm review of ADB's corporate strategy. We were asked by the board to give our own assessment, and a lot of the recommendations that we came up with in this particular study were actually adopted by management and had a big influence on both ADB business processes and on our programmatic priorities. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen always, right? Sometimes it's hit and miss. Sometimes you come out with an evaluation that hits the right buttons and it gets picked up and you're influential. And sometimes you write a report that everybody reads and say, yeah, okay, fine, let's ignore this, right? So it's hit and miss. One other way to sort of raise the profile of these big studies is by reaching out to the press. So if we write these big studies, we always prepare a press release, and we hope that it gets picked up either by in-country newspapers, but also by regional newspapers. Actually, we've been quite successful in the Bangkok Post over the last 4 or 5 years, for example. Now that helps, because even if the initial reaction inside ADB is, well, you know, we don't agree with what IED is saying, let's ignore it. If the press starts writing about it, and if the press starts saying, well, this report actually makes a lot of sense, quite often ADB management turns around it and says, okay, maybe we should think about this again. Maybe it does make sense what these guys are saying. So the role of the press and reaching out to media is important. Now this, let's skip this is just development of knowledge management in the ADB. It's only recently that the whole point of learning from evaluation started gaining prominence in the ADB. Why? Because ADB purely as a financing institution, as a lending institution, is becoming increasingly insignificant in this part of the world. Right? A lot of the countries have reached middle income status. That means that they have access to all sorts of forms of credit that lower income countries have not access to. So ADB is not the first organization that these countries look at when it comes to lending. And also, if you look at the overall financing needs of the region, and you look at the capital base of ADB, what we can contribute, purely in financial terms, is pretty insignificant. Right? If you look at infrastructure only, what ADB can contribute is less than 0.5% of the overall infrastructure needs of the region. So purely as a financer, we've become less and less relevant. Where we are becoming more relevant is in leveraging funds from the private sector and as a knowledge institution, an institution that can help countries dealing with complex policy issues. So we have a dedicated center in the bank that focuses on that, and we closely cooperate with this center in how we disseminate our lessons and findings. Let's skip this. Let's skip this. Now this is a nice diagram because it shows you how knowledge management and the production of knowledge products has evolved over the years and how it has gained importance. Not necessarily voluntarily, but like I explained, driven by external circumstances. If ADB continues to be just an institution that provides money, forget it. It will be irrelevant within the next 10 years. Right? So the only way to stay relevant is by combining money with knowledge and with the ability to leverage funds from the private sector. Why is that last part important? As most of you probably know, the region is awash with money. Right? There's no dearth of money in the Asia region, the private money. I mean. The problem is that money tends to be quite conservative or risk averse. So the private sector on its own is still reluctant to finance major infrastructure operations, for example. Where we can come in is if we say you have a financing plan of $100 and $80 have to be brought in by the private sector. If we come in on the sovereign side as the ADB, that provides just enough confidence to private either lenders or equity partners to come on board also. So the leveraging of private money in the region is becoming increasingly important for an organization like the ADB. Now, how do you process these lessons from evaluations? First of all, of course, you need to identify them in the evaluation studies that you do. Then you start with the flagging of emerging good practices. You disseminate them, you share them, and then you hope, of course, that these lessons are used or reused. And the database that I'll show you in a bit is just one tool of reaching out to people. Not the only tool, of course, by no means, but one of the tools. So about the lessons base, it's linked to the whole universe of ADB project documents. You can search it by country, by sector, by strategic agenda. So that is, again, that's ADB speak. The corporate framework has 3 strategic agendas, like I said: inclusive growth, environmentally sustainable growth, and regional integration. Drivers of change, also ADB speak. That stands for sort of cross-cutting concerns that are relevant across all the countries in the region. Think of things like governance, private sector development, gender. And there's also a Google type search facility that you can use, and of course you can filter and combine search parameters. And importantly, you can also export your queries into Word or in Excel. Now, when you're in Thailand, where the quality of internet is very good, that's not really important. But if you, like me, worked for a long time in the Pacific Islands, where internet quality is very poor, then the ability to download it and to work offline with the data that you've queried is important. So, like I said, more than 6,000 lessons from almost 2,000 reports, period of more than 20 years. Most of the lessons come from project-specific reports, but 10% also comes from the broader thematic, sectoral and corporate evaluations that ADB does. Then you see a bunch of acronyms there on the right side. PCR stands for Project Completion Report. That's the self-evaluation that's done by our colleagues in the operational departments. TACR stands for Technical Assistance Completion Report. PPER, I'm going to drill you on this after the presentation, so pay attention. PPER stands for Project Performance Evaluation Report. These are in-depth project evaluations. So these are really studies where people go to the field and really spend a couple of weeks analyzing how a project performed, good, bad, or indifferent. PVR stands for validation. These are some of the examples of knowledge products from the lessons database. Oops. This is the type of project that we would be interested also in teaming up with people like yourselves, right? Going into the database and look for data that refers to 10 years of ADB support to the health sector in Nepal, right? How can we analyze all the data in this database, and how can we synthesize that and turn it into a meaningful knowledge product? Okay, now we move to the actual database, and this is where we have to pray that the internet gods are with us. Normally when I start doing a demo of this database, there's some problem with the internet, so don't blame me if it goes wrong. So this is the landing page, lessons.adb.org. Then you end up here. So what you see on the top of the page are drop-down menus that allows you to search the database. You can do it by country, sector, by strategic agenda, and by drivers of change. We use that terminology because that's the terminology that ADB uses. And that's also to make it completely aligned with the project classification system that the bank uses. And then you have here like I said, the Google search type facility. Now, this landing page does not only provide you access to the database, it also provides you access to everything that is new and that has just come out of the department where I work. So if you scroll down, you see OPEDs, you see latest reports, you see information about events or seminars that we have organized, you name it. Right? Just have a look yourself after this presentation. So it's basically a sort of a one-shop window to everything that IED does. Now there's a couple of ways to query the database. One is to start by country. So if you go to the country drop-down menu, what you see is an overview of all the regions where ADB works. And again, these regions are reflective of ADB's organizational structure. So say you want to go to South Asia, and then because it's my second home country, let's go to Nepal, right? Fingers crossed. Yes. All right. So what you now get is an initial query of everything that has ever come out of IED and in terms of self-evaluation relating to Nepal. So that's of course a huge universe of hits. You can see how much it is by going to the end of the page. And it's 10 pages, so we're talking about hundreds of results. So you probably want to filter that down to a sector or a theme that you're interested in. Now, one way of doing that is by filtering it by sector, for example. Let's see, let's do public sector management. This is a sector that I find interesting. And let's see what happens then. Submit. And then, if the internet gods are with us, they are, you get filtered results for public sector management projects and programs in Nepal. Unspecified for time. So everything from 1995 to 2016, 15 probably shows up here. Now, what you see there is on the left side of the screen you see the title of a specific project, right? In this case, the governance reform program. You see more if you scroll further down. Governance support program, sub-program 1. So anyway, all those initiatives that are public sector and governance related and took place in Nepal, you will find here. And governance or public sector management in the ADB can anything from decentralization to financing of local government to fiscal policy to public financial management. It means a lot of things. Now the next step is to go to the program that you want to look into. So now you are one step further down in the funnel, if you like. These are the lessons from the project completion report for this specific program in Nepal. So here you find the lessons, right? All the specific lessons that were learned, let's not go over them, but all the specific lessons that were learned from that project. Now the funny thing is, people who work in evaluation often get accused by their colleagues in the operational side for being too negative, you know? If you want someone to spoil the party, invite an evaluator, right? The funny thing is, if you look at the self-evaluation reports that people on the operational side prepare, 85 to 90% of the lessons learned are about things that did not work, which is funny, because that would imply that you can only learn from things that didn't work, which is nonsense, of course. You can learn a lot from things that went really well. But apparently there's something psychological going on. If people think about lessons learned, they think about things that did not go well. So one of the things that we do when we do these PCR trainings, training people on how to prepare a good project completion report, is to try and drive home that message. Guys, you can learn a lot from things that went really well. And you can maybe replicate it also in other projects. Don't be so focused on the negative side. Anyway, so on the left side of the screen, that's where you get access to the wider ADB document database. So a couple of things that you can get access to. If you click here, let me just show it to you. You go to the original project completion report. The old project completion report has one section which is called lessons learned. But if you want the context, of course, you have to go back to the original project completion report. And this is where the internet gods are leaving us. Let's give it 2 seconds. Anyway, while we're talking. In addition to, why is this not working? These documents are available in PDF, by the way. If the internet would work, you would have now seen a PDF document on the screen. So that's the project completion report. But you can also go back to the original project data. Let's see if this works. No, I think we're really now. I feel left alone. What the project there, I'll just talk and ignore that this is not working. So the project completion report gives you the full self-evaluation of a specific project. The project data sheet gives you all the basic data of the time that the project was developed and prepared to go to the board for approval. So that's where you find all the implementation details, the financial details, the financial terms, you know, all the basic, the implementation period, the main implementation agencies, you name it. And here you see how the project was originally classified. Public sector management, subsector public administration. In terms of the strategic agenda, it contributed to inclusive economic growth, or at least it claimed to do that. No driver of change was selected here. And again, you can print and download this as PDF files. Now, let's see if we can. Let's go to Southeast Asia. Let's do Cambodia, for example. What do you know about projects in Cambodia? Do you know any ADB projects in Cambodia?
Yeah.
Yeah? Good ones or bad ones?
I just heard one about the project with the railways.
That was a very controversial one. You mean the one with all the safeguard problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a very controversial one. One of the things that ADB, and like the World Bank, an area where we are very vulnerable is when it comes to environmental and social safeguards, right? So ADB financed projects, in this case in Cambodia it was a big railway project, should not negatively impact on the natural environment, and it should also not negatively impact on the livelihood of people. Now in the case of, I don't know the details, but I know that there were a lot of resettlement issues in that project. So local communities were forced to resettle without being properly compensated for that. And obviously that created a lot of political controversy. Yeah. And in my point of view, but don't quote me on that, rightly so. Let me try again? Okay. Let's do this. Let's not look for railways. Let's look for education. Okay. So we're now in Cambodia. I'm going to look to the education sector. Okay, this still goes well. No, it's the next step where we go wrong. No. So again, let's basic education textbook project. Let's click that. This still worked. Yeah, and this is where we got stuck. So if I now want to go to the PCR again, the project completion report. Let's see. Your presence alone is enough. It worked. Can you stay here? Yeah. So here you get access to the actual report. Now, if you download it, like I said, you download it in PDF format. What you know, as you probably noticed, this database does not give you access to the raw data behind this. We are trying to move in that direction, but from a data management point of view, that is very resource intensive, because you can imagine the raw data behind more than 6,000 projects are enormous. So to organize that and to make that publicly accessible that will take, well, a lot of work. What is also not included in the database are evaluations on our private sector operations. Why? Because these projects quite often deal with commercially sensitive data, so they just don't give permission, or the project sponsors rather don't give permission in many cases to have that available online, unless in a heavily redacted form. But for all our public sector operations, everything is public. We have something called a Public Communications Policy, the PCP, and that policy is very strict. Anything that the operational departments in the bank publish, project documentation, has to go online the minute it becomes available. So this is one of these project completion reports, right? So that's where you see the full assessment. I'll just switch to the full assessment of the program. Was it relevant in terms of design and evaluation? What were the outputs? What were the costs? What was the disbursement schedule? You know, if you agree that a project of $100 million is fully disbursed after 5 years, have you achieved that, yes or no? What were the implementation arrangements? What were the conditions and covenants? That's where the safeguards also come in. So yeah, this also covers, for example, a reassessment of internal rates of financial internal rates of return, economic rates of returns that were used in the original design of the project. So there you have it, the full project. Now, let's see if we can also now go to the project data sheet. So I'll go further down. Project data sheet. She's still here. No, leaves. Ta-da. So this is where you get an overview of the original project as approved by the board of directors in the bank. So if we go there, project data sheet, project name, number, Cambodia. These things of course don't look very exciting, but if you want to mine this database, this is the type of information that you need to code for coding processes, right? Project officer, right? There you go. All the data. Then if you go here, all sorts of linked documents, safeguard documents, for example. Now in the education sector, safeguards is typically not a big issue unless it involves a lot of infrastructure construction of schools. So all the linked documents that are relevant to that project are available there. Now you can go from country to sector. You can also go, of course, from sector to country. It doesn't really matter. So you get the principle, right? So here strategic agendas, you can look for the three big agendas that the ADB uses: environmental sustainable growth, inclusive growth, and regional integration. Here you can search the database by drivers of change, the issues that I just mentioned: partnerships, knowledge, governance, private sector development, gender equity. Report type, that's probably not so interesting for you guys. And then this is the Google type search facility. So here you can just type in any keyword. Give me a keyword. Let's see if you find something.
Financial inclusion.
Huh?
Financial inclusion.
Financial inclusion. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Voila. So then you get all projects. This is not filtered by sector or by country. So you get what you get here is then all ADB projects where financial inclusion was either the major objective or one of the project objectives. So anyway, what I wanted to show you is that there's different ways of searching this database, and that through this database you have access to a whole universe of ADB documents. So that's it. So what I would like to ask from you, go online, lessons.adb.org, or you can go, also another way to go to the database is by going to ADB's website. That's our president, Mr. Nakao. Good afternoon, Mr. Nakao. Then you go to, you look for independent evaluation here. Because we have our own website, and then you will see if there's notes. You will find here evaluation information system, or EVIS. We have to come up with a different name for this. I'm not happy with this name. I mean, if you have any clever ideas, sort of an attractive name for this database, let me know, and I'll invite you for lunch. So this is another way of getting access. There we are again. Yeah? Okay, that's it from...
Yeah, could you show us about the Excel file that you mentioned? That
Yes.
A lot of data in there.
Yes. Good one. So let's go to Central Asia, say Tajikistan. And look at energy. I know that we do a lot of energy work there. So submit. Oi. That's strange. Okay. Let's do something else. So let's just do that. Center. Now you see here download Excel file, right? Just click. So then basically you get the filtered results in the form of an Excel sheet, and then you can just save it, of course, and work with it offline. And like I said, this might not seem too relevant for if you live in a country like Thailand, but let me tell you, if you're in Micronesia and it's already difficult to get access to a Yahoo email account, this is very useful. Yeah? Now, like I said, we've been doing quite a bit of work the last couple of months to improve the interface and the user friendliness and also the analytical functionality of this database, but by no means are we there, of course. One of the things that we did, this used to be based in Lotus, which is an incredibly old-fashioned and constraining platform, so we migrated it to another platform which opened up the interface and the possibilities. But this is very much work in progress. What we will do now is inside ADB and outside ADB on occasions like this, we'll show it to people. And if you think that you have ideas on how to further improve this, please let us know. You know, we're not going to do this on our own with the two people in IED that are working on this. So we'll be visiting our colleagues in the operational departments. We'll do a demonstration to the board of directors, and we'll do occasions like this where we just ask for input on how to further improve this and where. But in principle, just to kick it off, is this something that you can see using in your own research work, or is this completely useless? You can be honest. Or maybe I should start with the teachers. What do you think, teachers? Yeah? Why is it useful?
Because we deal with quantitative data, and you show the data which we could kind of download.
Yes.
Like for example, for data for the public sector, and just showing us the Excel file.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's usable and that's kind of.
Yeah. And inside, of course, you're right. This is a qualitative database, and most of the lessons learned are qualitative. But if you go inside the project completion reports, there's a lot of quantitative information, for example, in particular on the calculation of used financial and economic ratios. But to find those data, you have to go inside the project documents. Now, one thing that we want to do in the short term is to link this database with our results database. You know, ADB, in the end, one of the things that we do is that we give a rating to projects, right? Have they been successful, unsuccessful, partly successful? There's a scale for that, and there's also a numerical scale for that. So that if you can link this database to the success ratings database, then you can do interesting things in it. Or, for example, we could link this database to the recommendations database. But these are all possibilities going forward. Now, like I said, when we were when I did this in Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policies, the reactions were twofold. A, people thought it would be a useful resource for their students. And I don't know how this is here in the economics faculty, but in Lee Kuan Yew, of course, there's a big focus on development issues, right? On development economics and on policy issues in developing countries. I don't know, you have a specialized development economics subgroup, I think, but a big part of your work also is not particularly focused on the region, right? So my guess would be that this would be particularly useful for students of development economics, but I don't know.
But Mr. Rijn, I'm not quite sure that the data that we can access from the Excel is in terms of the qualitative data or quantitative data. Could I have a look again on the Excel file?
It's mostly qualitative, but of course you can circumvent that problem by using a coding system. Hang on, did we get stuck again now? Okay. Why is this not here? So report name, country, oops. And here you can, if you use the drop-down menu next to the main categories, you can further specify by calendar period, for example.
But is it possible for us to have like the raw data of your evaluations? So can we access this kind of thing? Because this is a qualitative data, but some of our students is interested in your project, for example. Can our student access the raw data? For example, financial costs,
The financial costs are easily accessible in
or the investment that you use to evaluate the project.
Sorry, the?
Like the investment or like the return.
Yeah, that's.
Can we access that kind of
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Well, not the raw data, but you can access it in the project completion report and in the project data sheet. All that information is there, but not in raw form.
So we will have to read by ourselves, and then we can know that what is the investment that we use for the evaluation.
All that information is here. You can find it here. The financing terms and conditions. But it's in those PDF documents. It's not in raw data, no. So what you should do is send me an email and say we would think it's very useful if we can access raw data, right? Because the more of that sort of requests I get or my team gets, the more easy it will be for us to make a plea with my bosses. Come on, guys. All these people are asking for raw data. We really should make that available, right? But at the moment, for two reasons. It's also what that would mean for us to maintain a database with 25 years of raw data. We would probably have to hire 10 people to maintain a database like that, right? So a middle ground could be that, for example, on the basis of a specific request, we can release the raw data. But to start managing a 25-year database with all that information, I don't think that is feasible, unless you guys want to do it. But it's a question that has been asked a lot.
Yeah, I think it would be useful if ADB can have at least maybe not 25 projects, but some project that is very useful for the region.
Yeah.
That can be the example.
Yeah. Or again, release those data on the basis of specific requests.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can show you, let me see if I can quickly find it. I can show you, just to make sure that we're talking about the same type of data. If you go to the PCR, the project completion report, here. This is not a good example. Well, I'm looking for the data that you are referring to project. Sorry, I don't want to give you a headache. This is the sort of basic project data, right? That you are looking for. It's burden date. Here's the. Well, in this case, it was a grant, so interest rates do not apply. This was not a loan. This was a grant. So. Project cost, how is it built up, foreign exchange, local currency, how is it financed. In this, I now accidentally picked a very simple project. You can also have a project with 4 different finances, and then this looks completely different, of course. borrow finance. If you would have a loan project, you would also see the commitment charges, the disbursement charges. So the full spectrum of all financial data is there. And then the other data that might be, sorry for doing this, guys, but I'm looking for description of the project. Well, in this case, because it's a policy-based operation, we don't have, this is not a straightforward investment loan, so you won't have the calculation of financial and economic rates of return. But normally when it's a discrete investment project, all those projections are also there. So that's the sort of data that you would be interested in, purely the financial and economic data?
One part. Yeah, but I think another part is like, for example, if you would like to look at Nepal or Bangladesh, you need to have the supportive data from the ADB. But I guess the ADB already have this kind of data, right?
What sort of data are you talking
about?
about?
For example, secondary education, if you would like to look like secondary education,
right.
Maybe like the graduation, the number of graduations,
right.
Something like that. I'm not quite sure this type of data.
Enrollment dates.
Yeah, enrollment date, something like that.
That sort of information is most likely available in the original project documents or in the country partnership strategy. And if it's not available in these documents, then there's always sites like the UNDP, the Human Development Index, or the World Bank Development Indicators. I mean, these data are available. The problem is, especially with economic and social data, that it's not always standardized, right? That's quite difficult if you want to come out with statistically valid conclusions about the state of health in Nepal, that you're reliant on 2 or 3 different sources that use their own methodologies, their own approaches, their own definitions. So it's quite often it's a struggle to consolidate that and come out with something that makes sense. And
upon request.
Upon request, yes. Now, from your side, is this something that you think could be useful for your own research or interest, or what do you think? I'm putting him on the spot all the time. What do you think?
I don't know, like as for me, because I'm a first year student, I didn't like touch too much about like the research side. Right now I'm mainly like doing my coursework.
Right.
But I'm doing like some like research. I'm specifically interested in about like the regional data.
Okay.
So like I don't know if ADB they provide like the regional data or
yes. Not. Regional data on what?
For example, like inflation, maybe.
Oh yeah. These are, I mean, again, remember, this is a project database, right? Yeah. So what you will find in this database is access to ADB financed projects that are regional in nature. So, for example, that could relate to regional trade, that could relate to customs, issues related to customs. It could be regionally financed, or the financing of regional infrastructure, so regional connectivity issues. In the Pacific, ICT is very important in that respect. And outside, if you're more interested in macroeconomic and fiscal data, the ADB produces something which is called the Asian Development Outlook, which is produced by our economics and research department, and that's more macroeconomic in outlook. So they do a number of they continuously come out with studies and papers, but their flagship publication is this one. That's the Asian Development Outlook, and that's where you can find the sort of data that you are now referring to. So, download this, or is this something we can download as well? Again, in PDF. Other publications that are interesting, if you're looking for that sort of data, are the Article 4 reports by the IMF. The IMF for most countries once a year or once every 2 years, they sort of take stock of the economic health of a country. And the reports that result from that are called Article 4 reports. And that has a lot of macroeconomic and fiscal data that you are referring to. Sorry, this is taking a long time. Wow. Oh, it's 317 pages. So typically this gives you a snapshot, a macroeconomic and a fiscal snapshot of the state of the region, if you like. Right? Economic trends, so this would be the type of data that you are referring to. So again, this is not project specific. This is an analysis of the region. But you can of course also link this. You can link the data here with the data that you find in project documents and program. Now what about the other way around? Would you be interested as part of your own research work, for example, to team up with us and develop sort of I'm not saying I'm paying you. In the development of knowledge products using this database and whatever other resources ADB has. Because I can imagine that the department where I work is not that big, and most of our time just gets taken up by the bread and butter business of what we do on a daily basis. So a lot of the times developing these knowledge products is done by people because they are passionate about doing this, right? It's quite often done in the weekends and in the evening hours. It's not part of their regular work. So especially when it comes to the mining of this type of data and raw data, the involvement from guys like yourself would be great. And what's in it for you is that you have your name on an ADB publication. Wow. But why did you say immediately yes? Why would you be interested in that?
Because just for myself, I'm always looking for the opportunities which I can maybe get an internship in ADB or just work for ADB. That's just my dream.
Right.
It's just personally.
Right. Yeah. It's not automatic, but of course, if you, people in my own experience, people that I've worked with, for example, who came as interns, on a number of occasions came back later as a YP or as a consultant. So yeah, it could be a way into ADB also. Yeah. But it's not a given. All right. But from your perspective, could this be something that we could explore in the development of joint products? What do you think? Well, you don't have to answer me now, of course, but would you be willing to think about it? Let's put it that way. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's useful in some of our journals, so our professors also do some project in this area. But it will be very nice if you can share your raw data with us.
Yeah.
So we can have some research correlation.
Yeah. Okay. Let me. I'll also go back to our colleagues in the knowledge services group, because this is now, well, for me, probably the 10th or the 12th time that people ask me that question: raw data. So.
And it will be useful for our.
All of you should send me an email, right? Individually.
Okay. No. Send him an email.
Yes, I'll give you my business card. No, I need that. Because it's difficult for me to go to my management and say, I think it's a really good idea. But if I say, look, I've got 25 requests for raw data, we should do something with it, then it's easier for me to do this. All right, thanks guys. Let me really give you my cards, and then any ideas that you might have, things that you like, things that you don't like. I'm not sensitive. You can be very critical. Yeah, and then let's see how we can further cooperate. We just started talking about doing a joint event next year, June, possibly in Bangkok. So if that pushes through, this morning's meeting was very positive. If it pushes through, you're all invited. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Today, I would like to thank Mr. Rijn to give us the knowledge about the ADB. And as you say that ADB to stay relevant in the region, it should move toward more the knowledge institutions. And one of the aspects of knowledge institution is to have the knowledge sharing. And then I think this is quite important for the ADB to share this knowledge to us. And today you provide us the database and promise us that if we would like to have the raw data, we can send the email to you. Right?
Yes.
Okay. And please give him the big hand for his talk today. I invite our white deans, Assistant Professor Dr. Giovanni Nahakun to present the content of appreciation to us.
Wow. I can only accept this as if less than $50.
It's 49.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, really? You know that is true actually, I wasn't joking. I'm not allowed, as an ADB staff, I'm not allowed to accept any gift above $50. If somebody gives me something that's more expensive, I have to give it to our audit department.
I'm sure it's 49.
Okay, good. So where are we going to take the picture? Okay, all right. You can also contact me, I mean I'm happy to give you cards of course, but you can also contact me through the website of that database. There's a contact us menu on the top bar. You're both from Timbuktu? You're from Timbuktu? Yeah, we have. Yes, I can find out. And also with on the job training. These are more people from government agencies.